Um, so I was trying to think about how or what I wanted to preach on as we start a new year. And it made me think back to the fact that almost 5 years ago today was my first class at Luther Seminary. And when I started at Luther, I started in the middle of the year. And my very first class was an intensive called Genesis to Revelation. It was a 5-day class that covered the entire Bible. So we literally went Genesis through Revelation in 5 days, learning how to read biblical literature in a new way. Part of this class requirement was to create study guides and study outlines for specific assigned books of the Bible, and one of those was Ruth. And when I thought about that, I thought, it might be nice to visit the book of Ruth. So that is what we're going to start this year out doing. We're going to spend the next few weeks looking through the book of Ruth, and maybe getting some new insights. The book of Ruth is often a loved book by many. It's a very interesting book. So we're going to start with lessons from Ruth. So the book of Ruth is more than just a story. The book of Ruth is, it contains moral teachings from God, and it demonstrates a resilience of women, especially when women work in harmony with one another and support one another. The book of Ruth was written at a time where society was highly patriarchal, which, realistically was a majority of our biblical teachings, right? It was taking place in a society where men were top dogs, and the husband or the father figure was the, top dog of their not only their household, but of their smaller community unit. The book of Ruth shows how women at this time, during this highly patriarchal system, were able to navigate that system to their advantage and work in a way that demonstrates their ability to survive in what can be very difficult and oppressive situations. There are many biblical scholars that suggest that the purpose of the book was to not only tell a good and inspiring story, but to improve upon the image of the Hebrew people, because the Hebrew people did not look kindly on others that worshiped God differently than they did. So it was also written to demonstrate a new outlook for Hebrew people as they regarded the way they treated others who worshiped God differently. The book of Ruth portrays God in a different manner in comparison to Ezra, which we will also study Ezra once we're done Ruth. In Ezra, God is seen as being opposed to Hebrew men marrying women that are not of the same descent. In Ruth, God is seen as almost giving a blessing to the marriage for allowing Ruth to not only marry, but to also conceive a child who would later become the grandfather of David, the king of Israel. Ruth also demonstrates the kindness of God towards anyone who shows trust and faith in God, no matter their background, their race, their ethnicity, their gender. The name of Ruth has a meaning of friendship and or female companion. So we're going to travel alongside our female companion and see more about not only Ruth, but learn more about Naomi as well. So today's lesson is going to come from the first chapter of Ruth. Hear these words. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab to live there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out to the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, even if I thought there was still hope for me. Even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this, they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me, the Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So, for a story to be seen by biblical scholars as being inspiring, it doesn't necessarily get off to the best start, does it? This story does not start in any kind of cheerful manner. In fact, there were very interesting circumstances that even brought our main character of Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi together. We hear that Naomi had moved from Bethlehem in Judah to a foreign country of Moab with her family due to famine. The famine forced them out of their country and go to where they had heard that God was providing food for people. So Naomi had moved from Bethlehem in Judah to a foreign country of Moab due to the famine. Ruth becomes Naomi's daughter-in-law, marrying one of her sons. In the 10 years of their relationship while in Moab, they both went through very tragic experiences. Naomi lost her husband, Elimelech. On top of that, she loses both of her sons, Mahlon and Chilion. These two her sons married 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. So we also hear that neither one of her daughters-in-law, Orpah or Ruth, had children. So they don't have children. Ruth becomes what is considered to be a childless widow, which put Ruth in a very bad situation. Because of the society and the measures of this time, she faced even more oppression as a childless widow than she would have just being a widow with a child. The fact that she is going to move back to Bethlehem with Naomi was only going to cause her even more problems. she was going to be considered low on the totem pole because she didn't have a child. She was a childless widow. And now moving back to Bethlehem after, because she's a Moabite, she is now going to be considered a foreigner, putting her pretty much at the lowest level in society that she could have been. Now, if we were to look at this story in the lens of today, it's hard to picture how Ruth and Naomi would have potentially felt. You know, we don't deal with this quite to the extreme that they do. But there are actually cult groups that claim to be part of the Christ-following world that still cling to this highly patriarchal system and society standard, where women are measured only on their ability to bear children and to be good wives. They claim that these practices are from God, yet nowhere in Genesis, when God created Eve to be a companion to Adam, did he say, I'm giving you a partner and her only job is to take care of your every need and to bear children. Not God's teachings. So God didn't put that practice into place, yet as human beings, man-made rules over centuries have claimed that God put this into practice. God created us to be partners, to be equals, to work together to better each other in our journeys and to fulfill our individual missions that he created each one of us to complete. If our worth was measured only by man-made rules, every one of us would fail constantly. God's way offers us success at every stage, even in our most difficult times, and even in the times where we think we are failing. We are provided a chance to learn from experiences, and through his mercy, through his grace, we constantly have a chance to do something new and to change where we're going, what we're doing, change our outcome. Naomi and Ruth didn't have that same hope at this particular time, especially because of the society that they were in. Now, Naomi, as they're traveling, Naomi and her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, they get partway back to Bethlehem when Naomi stops. And she provides a blessing to her two daughters-in-law. She says, may the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to not only your dead husbands, but to me. This shows a societal standard where having a spouse really made up a woman's personhood. That was the culture of this time. Naomi wants both Orpah and Ruth to get another husband. She wants that for them, which is why she even instructs them to go back to Moab, because she knows she can't provide it. Even if she got remarried, which in her mind is absolutely out of the question, she knows that, even if she could bear another son, that forces them to wait to marry this child, so they'd have to remain husbandless, and she didn't want that for them because of the cultural standards of the time. Naomi instructs them to leave. Orpah is the only one that, after initially declining, accepts her instructions and returns home. Ruth responded to Naomi with an oath that demonstrates the amazing relationship that the three of them had. In her oath, Ruth was declaring her commitment to Naomi, and that her commitment to Naomi was final, and Naomi wasn't going to be able to persuade her in any way. Not only did she refuse to leave Naomi, but Ruth actually changed her cultural and religious identity in order to stay with Naomi. This is actually a very, very big deal. By making this decision, Ruth was potentially setting herself up for a lifetime of singlehood in a society that valued marriage and children above all else. This oath shows a loyalty agreement that culturally at this time was only seen in marriage. To see this take place between two individuals outside the context of marriage was unheard of, which is probably why it almost rendered Naomi speechless. There are different cultures around the world that view relationships between in-laws differently. One of the commentaries I was reading comes from a scholar in Africa, and it was interesting to read about the African context because I think it goes along the lines of something that I wasn't expecting. The scholar wrote, in Africa, the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is generally sour, especially in patrilineal societies. The young women are overworked and treated like an outsider. Yet the wedding songs tell her that no matter how difficult life may be, she can't leave her marriage. You know, Ruth, Orpah, and Naomi had an amazing relationship, significantly different than many that might experience relationships with in-laws. Orpah choosing to accept Naomi's instructions and returning to her mom did not demonstrate that she didn't have a good relationship with Naomi. In fact, that decision from Orpah's standpoint should be respected, because Orpah choosing to accept Naomi's instructions shows that she was making a choice for herself. And that was something rare that women were able to actually do. In a patriarchal society, choices are made for women. In this situation, Orpah was able to choose for herself, which is something that needed to be celebrated considering the circumstances. Naomi and Ruth deciding to travel together, and Naomi not pushing Ruth any further to return, shows a bond and a commitment to each other to help each other along their journeys. And Ruth was willing to risk whatever that meant for her as an individual. So we hear that the two ventured to Bethlehem after the famine. Although loyal to each other, they had two very different attitudes when it came to the move. Ruth had an outlook to the move through the lenses of needing a fresh start. The past to Ruth was gone. The only thing they had to do was to look forward. Naomi arrived in Bethlehem with bitterness. In fact, when she was recognized upon arriving in Bethlehem, and it was asked if it was her, when they said, can this be Naomi? She even instructed and said, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. Mara translates to bitter. So the name she chose not only reflected how she felt, but actually translated to the word bitter. Naomi arrives feeling that the Lord had gone against her. She looked at the death of her husband and the death of her two sons as punishment from God. She thought because her family lived in a foreign area that in Moab that worshiped other gods, that her family was being punished by God because she lived there. Now, it doesn't say that they actually participated in that worship, but she thinks because they relocated out of Bethlehem to Moab, that God went, you're in a foreign area, I don't like it, I'm going to punish you. And that's, not the case. God takes care of his people who show faith in him, no matter where they're located. Refugees and the Bible go hand in hand. The Bible is familiar with immigrants, with wanderers, with refugees. God cares about his people, period. He cared about Cain, who caused his own demise because of the result of his sin. God provided provisions that forced folks from their homes because of wars and economic hardship and famine. Strangers to Israel were being treated with respect and love and dignity. And that was per law in Leviticus. The New Testament emphasizes a need to be hospitable towards strangers, especially the poor and the suffering. The new law erased this line between what a brother is and who a stranger is. They're pretty much the same thing. We're called to minister to those that are seen as refugees. We are to feed them spiritually and to care for their physical needs. This was not always done in this patriarchal, man-made culture and society. So it's understandable how Naomi thought that God was punishing her when, in hindsight, we get the chance to look at her story and to go, yeah, that's not exactly how that went down. But for her, because of the culture of the time, because of the situations of the time, because of what life taught her, in her mind, God was punishing her and took away her husband and her 2 sons. Now, we're just starting out this story of Ruth. We've got a lot more to go and a lot more of understanding to do. As we continue to journey with Ruth and Naomi, I want us to try to keep something in the back of our minds. As we walk our daily journeys, we can look at Ruth and Naomi and ask ourselves, depending on the circumstance we're facing, which attitude are we going to have? Both of these women had every right to feel what they felt. Both of them had the right to be grieving. Naomi had the right to be bitter and upset. Ruth had the right to just say the past is the past and I'm going to move forward. Depending on how we choose to react to whatever situations we have going on will depend on how we are able to relearn how to live based on a life-changing event or a circumstance. We can be bitter, we can be angry, and we can be upset. It's completely okay to be all of those things. And it is completely okay to be all of those things. If we stay in that realm of bitterness, we close off the ability to see new paths, to see the way that we can go to get out of a certain circumstance, to grow out of a circumstance, to learn something to allow us to better minister, to be better individuals, to be better disciples that God created us to be. If we keep Ruth in the back of our mind, a lady who was childless, husbandless, and now a foreigner, knowing she was the bottom of the barrel and was still willing to say, I got this. We can do this. We give God the opportunity to work through us, through our circumstances, and provide a way for us to be the being that God created us to be. It's not always easy. It doesn't always happen right away. Again, we are allowed as human beings to feel what we feel. We're allowed to react the way we react. We also need to remember that God is there in the midst. And when we put our faith in God, we are able to look at situations without blinders on. Sometimes we're able to step out of the past and move towards that fresh start. It's up to us to let God work and to move us toward whatever is on the horizon. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are humble servants that come before you today. We are grateful for a chance to learn not only from a story that seems simple, that also seems to have such a dark start, but shows the resilience and the determination when we put our faith in you, when we allow you to lead us, especially at times when we seem like everything will be bleak. We know that we have the ability to feel everything that we feel, and we ask, Lord, that you provide us a sense of peace and comfort, knowing you are in the midst of every situation we face. We ask that we feel you guiding us, walking hand in hand with us along our journeys this coming week. Allow us to feel you in our midst, that we might make the decisions that best reflect the hearts that we are to have towards our fellow man. Allow us to remember that there is no line between brother and stranger, that we are all in the family of God and that we should treat each other with the utmost love, respect, and care that we can. We pray all of this to you in your name. Amen.